Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am building a display for some masks that I made a while back. I sculpted a bunch of Majora's masks from The Legend of Zelda and thought I would put them on display in some way other than just stacking them up in a corner. The obvious would be to build a box, put them in a box, and then hang that on a wall. But I wanted to make something a little different, a little bit more interesting, so I thought about making a diorama for these guys to sit in. They're relatively large, and I needed to think about scale and what I wanted to put in the diorama. So I started thinking about the happy mask salesman and his big backpack. So I thought maybe putting his backpack in an open field and then having the masks spread out all over the place. So that's my intention, my goal, my thought is to build a backpack out of foam, put that on a diorama, maybe even try some static grass and some other stuff that I haven't got any experience with, and hopefully make something pretty epic. So today we are building a diorama for my Majora's Mask from Legend of Zelda. Let's get to building! This video will be a little bit longer than normal since I am making a foam prop and a detailed base for everything, so it's kind of like two builds in one. I made a template of the Happy Mask Salesman backpack and began by tracing it onto some 6mm EVA foam for the main body. If you see me use a template in a video, then it's pretty much always going to be free down in the description below. I save it as a PDF, so make sure that your device opens PDFs before you tell me that my pattern doesn't work. You'd be surprised how many people I have to explain tech to. To get some of the curves for the backpack base, I need to add a little bit of a bend. Unlike most builds, I am putting more of a cylindrical curve into it, so I don't need to push it over a round object. I just want to make a slight curve going down the middle of each piece. I use a heat gun for this. Another question that gets asked very frequently is, can you use a hair dryer? I would say no. Typically they don't get hot enough to make the foam pliable, and if they did, they'd burn the hair off of your head. Assembly time for the base. There are 4 parts that make up the front of the backpack and 1 for the back as it lays flat in that area. I start by contact cementing all my edges and letting them sit for a few minutes to set. Once dry, I start closing up the large darts. These are the V-shaped cutouts in the parts. Then, using my registration marks, I line up each piece, pushing firmly to secure the parts together, doing my best to make sure that the seams are flush on the outside. The backpack has a little flap at the top that I start at the seam line on the back. I pre-mark where the overlay will go down, then cover that and the adjoining areas with contact cement. Just like before, I close the darts up and stick it to the base. The bottom is a circle. Like in the game, it's supposed to have like these wrinkles around the pack where it cinches up. I spread out my wrinkles by tacking down the bottom of the pack, then tacking at halfway points. I keep going halvesies all around the circumference of the pack until they are all down. For the bedroll that sits on the top of the pack, I just cut out a rectangle of 10mm foam that is 6 inches by 12 or 15 centimeters by 30.5 centimeters for my metric friends. I cut a couple thin strips of 2mm EVA to act as strapping for it. I heated the rectangle up, rolled it into a tube, and then super glued it into place. I carved out a few little wrinkles along the areas that the straps would pull the mat tight. To make the ends flare out a little bit, I heated them up again and spread them out. The whole assembly then gets super glued to the top. The bottom overlay in the game model is cinched onto the pack with a string. So instead of cutting little pieces and trying to glue or line up individual little parts, my solution was to burn holes in the wrinkles with a wood burner. Once each wrinkle had a hole burned all the way through it, I could then simply just lace it up. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area while burning or sanding EVA foam. You don't want to breathe those fumes in. I also did this same step up at the top where the backpack would close. The front of the pack has a little pouch with a rolled up piece of paper poking out of one side. On this part, I burned the folding edges on the inside of the parts, then glued it together. Before I closed it up, I carved a notch on the right side, then stuffed a small rolled up piece of 2mm EVA foam. This part then gets glued to the front of the pack right there where the pack cinches up on that overlay. The last thing to do for the backpack is to add the shoulder straps. I burn in some grooves to give a little extra detail to some 2mm foam, cut out the strap attachment points, and then super glue them onto the pack. They attach just a little above the back seam line and tuck under the bottom cinch. To add another nice little detail, I burned in some stitch marks around all the seam lines. It's not really in the game, but I thought it was a nice extra little touch. Now for the second half of the video, I'm going to be building the base. You could build it straight out of EVA foam, but all the weight that I'm going to add to the top will eventually cause the middle to sag without a support. So I choose to use my Glowforge and just build a wooden box to support the inside. Bob over at I Like to Make Stuff mentioned a free website that will make a box for you. You plug in the dimensions you need, the thickness of your material, and a few other parameters to make a custom box, which was pretty awesome. I'll put links to that website down in the description. To maximize the space of my material, my box will be 10 inches by 3 inches by 13 inches. Once I have the things I want, I download the file, send it to my CNC machine, and cut it out of some 1/4 inch draft board. As a teenager, I worked in my uncle's cabinet shop where I learned a lot of skills in basic woodworking. Before you start writing in the comments that you should be using wood glue, understand that I just need these seams to hold together until I enclose it in foam. I taped it together and then glued the edges together with super glue. I did have one panel that was 1/8 of an inch. I did have some edges that were sticking proud of others. Before I glued on the outside, I sanded all the little pegs there flush with each other. Much like a pig in a blanket is a hot dog wrapped in a biscuit, the box is about to be wrapped completely in foam. All the joints will be locked in and make the overlapping materials super sturdy. I plan to put half dowels and other overlaying parts around the structure, so I wanted the outside to all be made of the same material. For when I paint, you don't see the weird texture change. To give the appearance of some fancy molding, I'm gluing some 10mm and 20mm half dowels to the bottom and the top of the short side all the way around my box. I also glued a 24mm rectangle on the top of my structure to act as the dirt/land that the diorama will be on. You may notice here too that I've sanded back an angle to all my corners. It was just a purely aesthetic choice that I made. Instead of leaving this whole top just a flat surface of grass, I thought it would be nice to have my backpack prop up against a rock. To carve a boulder, I used a cheap yoga block that I picked up at the dollar store. It is closed cell EVA, so I can carve into it, heat seal it just like I would other EVA to make my rock. I added crevices and cracks randomly, then glue it to the base. I also glued down smaller bits in front and even sprinkled some small pieces of gravel for a little variation. I spent a little bit of time on my computer finding images from the game, quotes, music stanzas, and other Majora mask references to add for detail panels to my base. My Glowforge made quick work engraving all my images into the foam. You could totally do it by hand, but it would probably take you quite a while. My Glowforge did all these carvings in less than 30 minutes. I thought since my diorama would have the Happy Mask Salesman pack, it was only fitting that I throw a quote of the man himself on the front. On the sides, they got a Majora's Mask, 2 ocarinas, and some Triforce symbols. On the back, I put the Song of Time, which is a song Link plays in the game to revert back to the first day. This time warp back is a necessary aspect in the gameplay and also allows you to save it. Each gets 2 coats of Plasti Dip. They both then get a light brown spray paint. The roll on the top is the right color of brown. The other parts need to be painstakingly hand-painted other shades of brownish colors. So, using my Plat Effects paint, I mix various colors together to get me closer to the game model. It won't be perfect, but my end result will be dirty anyway, so it's not going to be too bad that it's off just a little. I also went ahead and dry brushed some light gray over the top of my rocks on my base while I was at it. I have never used static grass before, so please do not use your technique advice from this clip. I watch several awesome diorama YouTubers like Studson Studio, Bolai Hobby Times, and North of the Border. All of them are linked on my channels tab on my channel page. This apparatus basically gets fake grass put in it. I put down some glue to my base, then set the ground wire in the glue. Done properly, the blades of grass will statically be charged and stand on end in the glue. I use some 12mm blend of light green grass from Woodland Scenics, not a sponsor. I still have a lot to learn about these materials, but overall I thought it was fairly good for my first go. Before I can call this diorama done, I need to dirty up this pristine pack a little bit in Much Props fashion. With some watered down brown and black acrylic paint, I slather it all over the surface of the pack. Then with a paper towel, I wipe off the high points, leaving that paint in all the recesses. This process gets repeated a couple of times until I reach a dirtiness that I am happy with. I decide not to glue any of these things down to the diorama so that it allows it to be a little more modular and customizable for whoever is the proud owner of it or who wants to buy it. It'll be on my Etsy shortly. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty cool. There's lots of little details in there that I added, nods to the game, things that I thought were very poignant to it, like the song being put on the back, this little quote from the Happy Mask salesman. And I kind of like this static grass stuff. I've never used it before, so it was definitely a learning curve, and I probably did a couple of things wrong, but I do like the way that it looks, along with the yoga mat block rock that I carved, plus the real rocks. So yeah, overall not too difficult. I decided not to glue this down because I wanted it to be positionable, and if I was to sell this thing, I don't want it to be shippable. So I left it open for the person who has it to then place the masks on, kind of drooping them on. And once you get some of them like on the actual backpack itself, it does make it pretty stable, he says, as it falls down. But overall, I think it's a pretty fun build and definitely something that you could knock out and not be too difficult. The base was pretty simple. It was just a box with decorations on it. The backpack was a little bit more difficult, but I've got it templated out for you and down in the description below. So if you want to build your own backpack, you can. Maybe you will try and make one of these and impress your friends with your ability to pull a scene from a Legend of Zelda game and put it into a thing that you can sit on your desk and just ogle at for a while. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some. Yay! And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these, tell them, much props. I thought it would be kind of cool if you put on Majora's mask. Why don't you try it? Here you go. If you enjoy what I do here on the channel and want to see more epic builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.